We have a terrific guest on the show today. This is Reyan Ali. He is a writer that has worked for Wired, Spin, The Atlantic, the AV Club, and lots of alt-weekly newspapers across the U.S. Born in Dallas, grew up in Karachi, Pakistan, and has a deep love for all things NBA, which led him to writing his book, the NBA Jam book, about the history of this incredible game. Reyan Ali, welcome to EP Live, my friend.
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for having me on.
This is great. I have to ask about the how do you make a dream opportunity like this come together, where you get to dive into the history of a celebrated franchise like NBA Jam?
Some of it was luck. Some of it was definitely just the desire to do a book in the first place. So the publisher that I did the book for, it's called Boss Fight Books. They're out of Los Angeles, California. Yeah. And they've been publishing books, starting with Kickstarter campaigns for a while now. And they had an open call for pitches. And this was 2015 when I think it was 2014 when I found them. And it was 2015 when I decided I was going to write a pitch. You know, they had an open call. And I always knew I wanted to do something more substantial beyond just doing articles, you know, do something like a book. Yeah. And I was thinking, what is a great game for a book? Like, what really could deserve a book in terms of what stories are out there, subject matter I could get, you know, the research I could do, what is really worth all that effort? And I racked my brain, and then I was like, NBA Jam. I mean, that would be a great topic. They hadn't done a sports book at that point. And, of course, NBA Jam is below it. And I actually worked on a Mortal Kombat website when I was a kid, so I knew all those Midway guys by name. So I recognized a lot of them. So it was the perfect merger of those worlds. And then I pitched it back in June 2015. I was like, oh, it's just going to take me a year to get it done, maybe a couple of years. And then lo and behold, now in October 2019, it's out. Better late than never. It took a lot of work, but it's been an amazing ride along the way, and I've talked to some crazy good people.
Midway is one of my favorite video game companies, and it breaks my heart that you know, a lot of these intellectual properties that were created there are just sort of languishing. They're just sort of sitting there, you know. And I feel like it was such a seminal place for inventiveness and creativity that obviously started in the arcade. What did you discover about the creatives that you got to interview and spend some time with at Midway?
Yeah, I really found that a lot of them had a lot of camaraderie, which I really enjoyed. I got to hear a couple of different anecdotes that were about NBA Jam, and then some other things that were about other games that really indicated what kind of, you know, interplay they had within that team. One of my favorite stories involves the dunks in NBA Jam. So, you know, you take those crazy dunks for granted. You know, somebody's jumping way higher above the hoop than they should. And then I thought it was one of those things that, you know, that was part and parcel of NBA Jam in the first place. They must have pitched this to the NBA. But no, they actually started off doing realistic dunks. And then it was Eugene Jarvis, you know, Defender and Robotron fame and all those other classic games. Yeah. And he was in Mark Turmell's office. Mark Turmell, the lead designer of NBA Jam, or lead programmer on NBA Jam, was showing him a demo of the dunks, and they looked very realistic. At that point, they had the digitized characters in, and it looked great. But Eugene Jarvis said, you know, that looks good, but, like, you know, can you make them go 3 times higher? And then Turmell was like, maybe, maybe not. And then he's like, you know what, it's Eugene Jarvis. I'll give it a shot. I mean, that was his mentor. That was somebody that he really looked up to. And then lo and behold, that ended up being an incredibly good idea, and it's such an iconic part of the game. So a lot of it was finding out about how the personalities intermingled, you know, how they're all very blunt with each other. I mean, when Mark Turmell came back from lunch one day with Jamie Rivett, another programmer over at Midway, and they'd just come up with this idea for an on-fire mode. You know, they'd gone to Burger King. They had really been racking their brain for a good way to add a power-up to the game, and they came up with on-fire mode. And then they pitched the idea to Sal DeVita, who was an artist over there at the time. And he said, Mark says, Sal, give me some fire graphics. And Sal says, that idea is stupid. I'm not going to do it. So Mark Turmell had to go use the graphics from Smash TV in that original demo of the fire mode to show it to Sal DeVita and to convince him that it was a good idea. So finding out things like this was really great. I mean, just knowing that, you know, a lot of things about NBA Jam, it's so successful. It seems like such a gimme. It wasn't a gimme at all. None of those things that happened had to happen. So it was really cool finding out about the circumstances that led there, and a lot of that was based on that dynamic of the team.
Actually, before I ask you my next question, I have to let everybody that's watching the live show know on the chat here. We have 3 copies of the book, NBA Jam, the book, to give away. Reyan is going to graciously provide those, and they're going to go to the 3 best questions that we get from you guys. I'm going to decide which they are, but you got to help me out by going all caps, okay, so I can read them clearly and easily on the screen there. But if you've got a good question here, please shoot them our way, and we'll just need to get your emails, and then Reyan will send you a copy of the book, and you can read about the incredible history here. It makes you know, I've obviously gotten to know some of these people over the years over at Midway, but there was something really special about the chemistry of that studio in Chicago, and I'm wondering if you know, it's preserved and these people get together and they celebrate the work that they did, because it didn't exist before them, and then they found it somehow. It's like they chiseled it out of digital stone, and they built, you know, kind of a permanence in the video game medium. And I'm wondering if they recognize that, and if they still get together and celebrate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think they didn't quite understand at the time just what they were doing. To them, you know, one game leads to another. They had to do, let's say, 3 or 4. I think it was something like 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 within a certain time frame.
Yep.
And
that's,
you know,
NBA Cat right there, right beside you.
Yeah. Yes, I got Bex over here joining us. Yeah, he has to make a cameo. Yeah. There was, I mean, it was a really rigorous process in terms of, you know, getting those games out the door. I think that they knew that they were onto something special. I think a lot of the time afterward, you know, as there are these things like these retrospectives that are coming out, and people talking to them, they're really getting an idea of that. One of my favorite stories that I heard while making the book was of the very first night that anybody ever played NBA Jam over at Dennis's Place for Games in Chicago, Illinois, this arcade over there. You know, Sal DeVita and Mark Trammell, the team, they go and they set it up, and nobody cared about the developers. All they cared about was the game itself. So, you know, now if you see a developer like, oh, boy, you made the game, that's so cool. You might want to get an autograph. You might want to get a photo. Might want to talk to them. People didn't care back then. So they didn't exactly think of themselves as rock stars at the time. Now, of course, when NBA Jam takes off and Mortal Kombat takes off, I'm sure that did something for them. Yeah. But at the time, I don't think they really realized that. But they were definitely a very tight-knit group. They would stay together after hours. They would do things like play first-person shooters together. Someone described to me as, you know, the real time at Midway, when the real work begins, is when all the executives have gone home. You know, it's nighttime over there. So they spent a lot of time clowning around and messing around and making, you know, just having fun, making jokes. I heard a story involving there's some kind of prank involving a rat put inside somebody's briefcase. I mean, it was really just a real interesting place, and there wasn't too much oversight in terms of the executives saying you can't do this in a game, or you can't do that, you can't do that. So there was a lot of camaraderie over there, and I do know that they still keep in touch. You know, during the research, I skimmed Facebook, you know, tried to find their profiles, and all of them are still interacting. I mean, I think that whole era and the success of those games really created a bond amongst those people that is still there today.
That's fantastic. What was the size of the team that made the original NBA Jam for the arcades?
It was 7 people. It was, I believe it was, let's say, I think it was 3 programmers, 3 artists, 1 sound guy. Now, that's not counting Tim Kitzrow, the announcer. Yep. And, of course, there's hardware support and people who are working on the executive side. But actually, like the real main team that were, you know, deep in there for months, that was 7 of them.
And most of them in their 20s, not much older than college age. And it was kind of still, even in the 90s, it was still kind of the Wild West in the industry, wasn't it? It
was absolutely the Wild West. And, you know, Mark Trammell, the main creator of the game, and somebody who I'd say is the closest thing to a protagonist of the book. I mean, I would say he is the protagonist.
Yeah.
He was, you know, he'd experienced a lot of success as a teenager. I mean, he was making $10,000 a month in royalty checks while living in a suburban home in Michigan. You know, he was programming Apple II games in his basement, sending them off to California, getting $10,000 a month royalty checks. He was somebody that had already been a veteran of the video game business, but still had so much fire in him, and he really wanted to do big things. NBA Jam was his 3rd arcade game with Williams Bally Midway, and he was, I think, 29 or so when the game really went on test and when it came out. And he was just, you know, just full of energy. I mean, everybody was just very spirited. I heard stories of people throwing chairs at each other over NBA Jam matches that went wrong. Let's say, you know, you get in an argument, it might turn serious. They were betting on the game. I mean, they were spending their own money. And Mark Trammell was also a bit of a mischief maker. So he'd go there and he'd tweak the stats under the hood. You know, the developers would be putting in their own money to play these games. and Mark Trammell would know what the stats actually were because he just programmed them that day. So the guys were having a lot of fun. They were young, they were spirited. It was just such a great time, and there was some real magic about that too. I mean, thinking that Mortal Kombat's being made down the hall, and Midway's 992, 993 was just incredible. You have Mortal Kombat come out, it's huge. NBA Jam comes out, it tops Mortal Kombat in terms of sales. Mortal Kombat 2 comes out, that tops NBA Jam. It was just a wild time, and at that moment, Midway was on the top of the world.
Cruisin' USA was out around that time.
Cruisin' USA, Revolution X, Terminator 2, the arcade game.
Smash
so many
TV
classics.
had come out and been successful, and Total Carnage was out there. Yeah, crazy, unbelievable. And what do those guys all say about the video game industry today?
A few of them shared their thoughts. Most of them just focused on, reliving the good old days. I believe that everybody's still involved in the video game business, but I only really got some opinions about it from a few of them. One of them, I forget what kind of project he's working on now. He didn't really give me too much insight on it, but he's still just grinding away. I don't think that he thinks that he doesn't feel like he's ever going to reach NBA Jam success again. He feels a little funny about that. Is thinking like, I just topped myself back in 1993 and I'm still working at it. In terms of the industry today, I didn't really get too much feedback in terms of how they think about games now, aside from Mark Trammell, who's over at Zynga, and he's working on Match 3 games over there, and he's still very successful, and he's
ouch.
I mean, for whether the games are good or bad, or what kind of license that they have, or what kind of licenses they don't, he takes them very seriously, and he's always poring over the data, and he really applies the same kind of arcade philosophy to the games that he does over there right now.
Yeah, and what's probably funny is he
1 second to get them.
Yeah, and he probably reaches even more people with his Match 3 games at Zynga than he ever did through NBA Jam, right?
Absolutely. He told me, I remember reading his stats, something that was so absurd that I was like, that can't be right. It was something like one of his games reached 7 million players in a month or something just absurd. But it's logical when you really think about it. But off the top of my head, just 7 million just sounds like to be too much. But that's Mark Trammell. He's very active nowadays still.
Awesome. Okay, we've got a great question from Hip Hop Dan, very off-kilter question. How much money did I save playing NBA Jam rather than taking ladies out on dates?
Oh, man. That's a tough question to say. How much money did he save by playing NBA Jam versus...
I guess you could equate that to how much money NBA Jam made.
Oh my gosh. Okay, in that case, then yes, he saved a whole lot of money, yeah. NBA Jam was just a monstrous success, and that was one of those things that I kind of had an inkling of, but I didn't really quite know about until I did the research for the book. So the game made $1 billion in 1993, and just for contrast, Jurassic Park made $343 million, I think is what it was, in its first year that was out in theaters. And that's $1 billion.
Incredible.
And more incredible than that to me is that it was $1 billion in quarters/tokens. I mean, this wasn't anything involving the home games. It wasn't anything involving Tournament Edition or any of the sequels. Just the straight original arcade game by itself. $1 billion, and that's probably a conservative estimate. I've heard that it's 1.2, 1.3 billion, and I can believe it. I mean, for a moment there, NBA Jam was on top of the world.
That is amazing. Hip Hop Dan, you saved yourself $1 billion by playing.
Yes, or at least somewhere near there. But no, look, people spent a lot of money. You probably did save yourself a lot of money over there. On the other hand, though, you missed out on playing as some pretty good secret characters.
Yeah, and you could have been playing at NBA Jam with the ladies. So I don't know.
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
But the NBA Jam's a great date game. But you did win yourself a copy of the book by that interesting question right there. So we'll get your email address and we'll get it off to Reyan, and we'll get you a copy of the book. We got a good one from Dr. Gamelove. Did they have to get permission for the celebrity characters like Bill Clinton?
They did not, no. So this was more Acclaim's doing than Midway's. So this was NBA Jam, the home games, and NBA Jam Tournament Edition, where those secret characters really started taking on more of a pronounced role. So it started off with just the characters, or rather the developers, messing around in the studio over at Midway. I mean, it was just a joke to them. Like, they'd put their heads in the game. They could use a code to access it. It's all a good time. Nobody was really going to care. And then one thing led to another, and that became a big part of the mythology early on. Well, when Acclaim got a hold of the game, they said, well, why don't we throw in more people? Why don't we throw in Bill Clinton and Warren Moon and Randall Cunningham and the Beastie Boys and George Clinton and DJ Jazzy Jeff? I mean, it's like Mad Libs with basketball.
Yeah.
So, no, Bill Clinton did not sign off on his likeness being in there. And neither, as far as I know, did DJ Jazzy Jeff or George Clinton, both of whom I talked to for the book. neither of them ever recalled being contacted by Acclaim or getting paid for it.
Wow.
Did say that maybe there's a chance that somebody talked to his management about it, but that was his, he was kind of couching his answer. From what I understand, there was no signing off on that. I mean, video games were Wild West back then, and just being in the game itself was such a huge source of excitement for at least DJ Jazzy Jeff that he didn't really mind. Like, he looks at it with such fondness, even though he never got a dime off of it, as far as I know.
Interesting. Did anybody ever threaten a lawsuit or anything like that, or was it were people just happy to be in the game?
I have never heard anything about anybody filing a lawsuit. I feel like I would have at some point stumbled across it with all the people I talked to and all the research I did. I did hear one rumor once that the Beastie Boys might have done something, but then I checked with somebody else who debunked that. So as far as I know, nobody did. So I guess Acclaim were really lucky in that case.
Could you imagine being in NBA Jam? I mean, it was a phenomenon, right? Like, it was in every bar, it was in every arcade you walked into. What an honor it would be to be associated with that brand in any capacity, right?
Absolutely, and that's almost the exact words that DJ Jazzy Jeff used when I talked to him. He called it a badge of honor being in that game. He said it was almost like a badge of honor. And I got to also talk to Air Dog, who was one of the more obscure characters, but he was in, I think, the home version of NBA Jam, or the first one that Acclaim put out, and he was the son of an executive over at Acclaim. So he's the smallest player in the game, and he's memorable because of his name Air Dog, and you wonder, who's this kid? He's got his front teeth missing, and he did not know that he was going to be in the game. Somebody ended up his brother's father took his photo, and his dad liked to take photos. Air Dog, or rather Eric was his name. He didn't really, pay too much attention to it, but his dad was an executive at Acclaim. So one day he comes over and he says, well, let me take a few photographs of you. So Eric's like, okay. And then lo and behold, a few months later, he's in NBA Jam. And, for that moment, he was on top of the world.
Incredible. So, that's the luckiest kid in the world right there.
He was the luckiest kid, yeah.
I heard that Michael Jordan got his own copy of NBA Jam, his own arcade machine. Yes? Did you get to talk with the Michael Jordan team members at all? To anybody that worked for him or anything like that? Did you confirm that?
I did not confirm it with him, but I talked to enough people at Midway to say that is absolutely a real thing. So it isn't just Michael Jordan, too. What makes the story even better is that there's a version of NBA Jam out there that has 3 people on it who were not in any of the editions of NBA Jam, or the original editions of NBA Jam. Yeah. So one was Gary Payton, who ended up showing up in Tournament Edition, but he wanted to be in the game ahead of time because he loved NBA Jam. I mean, it was a big hit amongst the players. Yep. So Gary Payton was one. Second one was Michael Jordan, who was also a big fan of the game, or at least had heard about it, even though he hadn't licensed his actual likeness for the game because it cost so much money, as in, I'm guessing Midway couldn't afford it. He still wanted his own version of the game. And a couple of guys from Midway talked to me about, going in and putting Michael Jordan's face in the game and using reference materials for that, and then getting him a version of it. But the third one, which I thought was pretty cool, was Ken Griffey Jr., and he was such a big fan of the game that there's now this is something that I've got a photo of to prove. Pictures that he took, or rather he had somebody take of him, of his head at different angles.
He sent
so
them
that he
in.
could be a secret game. What's that? I'm sorry?
He sent them in. He sent his own photos in.
He did. And then not only that, what makes it even better is that the team said those photos aren't good enough. We need better photos. So then he took his photos a second time. Oh, and wow. I'm going to have to repost that. It's really a fantastic picture, and you can see an NBA Jam machine in the background. It's super cool. So, yeah, those versions exist. As far as I know, there's one in Mark Tramel's garage or basement, someplace like that. He's got a storage area with these old arcade boards in there. And that Michael Jordan board is somewhere in his home in California. And then Gary Payton actually has 2 mint-condition NBA Jam machines still sitting in his place. I got in touch with Gary Payton's management. They never got back to me to show me anything. They said that, oh, yeah, we'll get back to you. Never heard anything. Hopefully someday they get back to me again and I can see some proof of it. But it just makes my heart just feel so big. I just feel so warm thinking that, wow, somewhere out there's versions of NBA Jam that people haven't seen, and that game came out 26 years ago.
That is so rad. Dr. Game Love, you're going to get a copy of the book as well, my friend. Good question. I've got another one in here that I thought was great. Sorry, I'm looking through all the questions here. This one was from not the EA. That is a good question. From Danilo Dantas. You're also going to get a copy of the book as well. What was, in your opinion, the best version of NBA Jam, and why?
Oh man. So all right. So when it comes to stories, all the good stories in the book, everything focuses around the original NBA Jam. But just from an aesthetics perspective, from a gameplay perspective, I don't think you can do any better than NBA Jam Tournament Edition, especially that early version where you could play as the Mortal Kombat characters that the NBA eventually nixed. I mean, they weren't into that at all.
Yeah.
But there's versions out there where you can play as Scorpion and Sub-Zero and Reptile and Raiden. That to me is peak NBA Jam, where not only do you have the best in basketball at the time and a better version of the game, but you've got other people from Midway. You've got all the Mortal Kombat members making an appearance.
What is your cat's name? Your cat is the best thing, and we'd like to have the cat in every Skype interview from now on.
Oh man, his name is Bex. He's a good boy. Actually, his sister is named Sora, which we didn't know at the time was a video game character because my wife's friend named her. She went up to it was either her and her friends, or her friend was at a restaurant and asked a waiter, "What should we name our cat?" That cat ended up being Sora, and she's right behind me over there.
How sweet. So
we got Bex and Sora over here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Got a good question here from our buddy Blair Farrell. The Boss Fight book series tend to be unique from one another and have their own style. Did you read any of them for inspiration, or did you want to do your own thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. I brought one over here just to show you. So this is Bible Adventures by Boss Fight's publisher and my editor, Gabe Durham. And the physical version of NBA Jam is coming shortly too. I did read them. I've got a soft spot for one about Galaga by Michael Kimball. Cool. But mine is a little bit different. So Boss Fight, the whole idea with the series is they've got different subjects, different authors, different takes. So somebody might do more of a documentary in style approach. Somebody might do something that's more personal. I really wanted to make it seem like, you're watching a movie. I really wanted to go with that first approach. So I was definitely familiar with the other ones, but I think I took it to the next level with some of the research I did. Ended up doing 68 interviews, which is, as far as I know, a record for Boss Fight books, and I went way overboard. If I did it again, I wouldn't do 68 interviews. I'd probably top off at about 50. But I really wanted to just squeeze every little bit I could. So, yeah, this is the longest book in the series, which is a point of pride for me. At first, I was negotiating about page count and space, and they were very generous with me because I wanted to tell the story I wanted to tell. I've got characters in here, plot developments. I've got the Rise of Midway, the Fall of Midway. So my book's a little bit different in the way that I think it might be a little bit bigger than some of the others. But there's some fantastic titles in the series, and I definitely encourage you guys to check them out.
So you dive into the Fall of Midway.
I do. Yeah, I don't think anybody's
What
really
happened there from your perspective?
Yeah, from my perspective, so I got to talk to a bunch of different people about it. Some people that were there for the very end, some people that checked out right before it was all finished. Mm-hmm. What it sounded like things went off the rails when they lost the arcade business, is because that was such a big part of the company that it was not only financially important, but from a morale perspective, they were the leader in arcade games. And, in the mid and early 90s, Midway was the company for that. Midway, Capcom, Namco, there's a few others out there, but that was Midway's bread and butter. So then when they had to close up shop on pinball in 99 and then on the arcade games in 2000, they were kind of left without an identity. I forget who described it to me as this, but it was like, they were going back to square one.
Yeah.
They were huge, and then all of a sudden they're just another developer out there that is competing with everybody else.
And the budgets were totally ballooning at that point too, right? And they had to keep up with the Joneses. Yeah.
And Midway, to some degree, had more money than they knew what to do with. I mean, they were just spending absurd amounts, just millions on celebrity endorsements at a time when they probably should have been cutting back a little bit. I mean, they had, just off the top of my head, they had a John Woo game. They had one with Snoop Dogg and John Singleton that ended up getting canceled. I'm sure that cost them a pretty penny.
They had The Rock in the Spy Hunter sequel, which wasn't as good as the original one. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And they had licenses like things like, there was a Happy Feet game. Now, there's nothing wrong with Happy Feet itself, but when you're doing nothing but licenses and you're spending a fortune on that, and Lawrence Taylor for Blitz the League, and you're paying Shaq $1 million for a few hours of motion capture for NBA hoops and things like that. I mean, all that adds up. Yeah. And people, they just knew it wasn't sustainable. And the guys at Midway were very bummed. Sal DeVita and Mark Turmel, who are some of the key people on NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game, they held on hope to the very end. At least Sal DeVita did. He's like, just one more game, the right game will turn it around. It isn't over till it's over. But it was just heading in that direction where there was no way that they could be sustainable again. And I think that the company didn't really seem to have the proper leadership either. I mean, a lot of people I got to talk to indicated that. I talked to John Romero, who had that cup of coffee at Midway when he was working on Gauntlet 7 Sorrows.
Right.
And he indicated that, management didn't know which way was left, which way was right, or what was going on. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors that went into it. And it was a very sad thing that it had to happen. But, I mean, they would never reach that peak again that they did in the early 90s. And then they just couldn't handle themselves as a home company.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's also, a good story about the constant changes that occur within this medium, like companies like Acclaim that are on top of the world. I remember visiting the Acclaim offices in New York and getting the whole tour and flash forward a couple of years later and they're completely gone and out of business. And THQ, it's the same thing. I mean, sometimes they're massive companies and then poof. What do you think is going on with NBA Jam? I know that EA picked up the rights to it. Are we ever going to see a good NBA Jam game again?
I think we'll see an NBA Jam game again. Whether it's good or not depends on who's got it in their hands. As far as I know, EA still has the license to it.
Yep.
This is one of those things that was kind of tricky to figure out. Okay, where is this? So at least through 2019, EA has the license to NBA Jam. Don't know why they haven't done much with it. So I also did have a chapter in the book about the EA Sports version of NBA Jam because that was kind of a cool bow on the whole story of NBA Jam. I mean, they had Mark Turmell involved in the game and Tim Kitzrow involved in the game.
Yep.
I don't know why EA haven't really picked it back up, and apparently the game did really well. It's always taken a back seat to some of their other franchises, and maybe there's something about it being homegrown because NBA Jam, of course, was Midway and it was Acclaim, and then it was EA. Maybe something like that played a factor too. I hope it's going to happen. I don't quite know if that will, but I have a feeling. I mean, there's no way that it can sit on the shelf for too much longer. I mean, it's going to be 2011, I think, is when the last version of NBA Jam came out, if you're counting a console game. So, I think we're about due for some kind of remake, somebody doing something.
100%, absolutely. It doesn't have to come out every year. It doesn't have to, squish us with stuff, but once every 3 or 4 years would be incredible. Did you get to spend a lot of time with Tim Kitzrow? He's one of my favorites in the game biz. I love that guy.
He's incredible. No, Tim Kitzrow is fantastic. I've got him leaving me voicemails that start off with "Boom shakalaka, Shaq to the rim." Hey, how you doing? It's Tim Kitzrow here, and it's fantastic. I mean, he's really embraced the whole NBA Jam persona. What's funny is that he kind of stumbled into it. I mean, he was a struggling actor in the early 90s. He came from working with Second City, where, there was Steve Carell, there was Amy Poehler, there was Stephen Colbert, I think. I mean, all these really cool, successful people whose names are very familiar. And Tim Kitzrow was a really talented guy who just never got that break.
Yeah.
And then, he stumbles into NBA Jam. It was his first video game. He'd been doing pinball games for Williams Bally Midway, but never done a video game. NBA Jam takes off. He doesn't actually do so well financially when it comes to NBA Jam, which is something that I get into in the book. And a little sad, actually. Pretty sad when you think about it. But he's really found a way to find his niche in the world. I mean, he's announced NBA games before in terms of saying things over the loudspeakers. He did a Rockets game in, I think it was 2015. He's in a Hornets game, Washington Wizards game. He's I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other examples. He does stuff with the Golden State Warriors.
He's been making music recently too, and he worked on the Mutant Football League game.
Yes, incredibly talented guy. So I got to know him a bit. Had about 4 really good 2.5 hour long conversations with him. So we really got into some deep stuff, and I felt very lucky to be able to share his story too, because Mark Turmell's story and the Midway team story is something that is a little bit more out there, I'd say. You can go back through game history, but Tim Kitzrow is one of those guys that's always been on the sidelines.
Yeah, and always sort of persisted and sort of moved with the business as well. He's contributed in major ways all the way along, and maybe not really kind of received the recognition that he deserves. Do you want to do another video game book now, or what's your direction now? Now that you finally got this book done, this labor of love for the last 5 years or so, what do you want to do now?
I would say what's next for me is, if just having to guess off the top of my head, I'm probably going to go in the direction of doing something like a novel, just because as much as I love video games and as much as I love doing this research, it's just a lot of work. Finding the interviews, finding the subject, doing the transcription, putting in the story. I mean, it was a great process, but it's a lot of work. And the nice thing about writing a novel is you can just do it off the top of your head. You can go with whatever. That said, though, I'm definitely not done with writing video game books. Definitely want to do another one. I've got a couple of subjects I'm kicking around in my head. Don't want to say anything about it out loud.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I'm definitely not done with video game books by any means. But it'd be nice to have a break for a little bit and not have to worry that, okay, did I source this right, or did I fact check this, or will this potentially offend somebody? Is this an accurate thing to say? Am I contextualizing it right? It'd be nice to just write and do that part of it. The writing part's always fun. The research part can be really hard and very intensive, especially when you're going back through 68 interviews and all the decades of stuff. But I probably made it harder for myself than I actually had to.
Well, you had a fantastic story to write there as well, and my hope is that lots and lots of people read this book, and not only does NBA Jam come back in some, wonderful way, but also a lot more attention is paid to Midway's incredible archive and library. And Dr. Gamelove just posted in our chat there that he'd like to see a Midway collection on the Switch, and hell yeah, I still don't have a portable Robotron, which just doesn't make any sense to me. Incredible story. I can't wait to read the book, and it's been really, really nice having you on the show, and I hope to have you back on again soon, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. So you guys get out there and pick up a copy of NBA Jam, the book, and everybody that is winning one, stay on the chat, and we'll talk to you guys about how you get us your info, and we'll get you a copy of the book. Reyan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.